When we evaluate rigorous scientific research, we define truth as an attribute of our beliefs and linguistic expressions. We see this attribute applied to the way we structure our theories, laws, and hypotheses. The philosopher Alfred Tarski formalized this through the correspondence theory. It posits that an expression is true if it corresponds to an external reality. The statement, "snow is white," possesses truth content because physical snow matches that description. A competing framework is the coherence theory. Under this model, we judge truth by the logical consistency within a closed system of statements. If a statement follows the established rules of that system, it is considered true regardless of the physical world outside. The consensus theory, the relativist view, regards truth as a social construction. In this framework, truth is a product of group agreement, divorcing the concept from objective measurement. The correspondence framework provides a specific functional advantage by connecting research to the environment. By prioritizing this external link, the discipline attempts to move beyond internal logic or simple social agreement. This diagram illustrates the Scientific Realist Model, which serves as the empirical engine for the correspondence theory. It maps exactly how theoretical constructs in Box 1 attempt to capture the independent external world in Box 3. Consider the attraction effects theory in consumer research. Researchers posit that introducing a decoy brand into a choice set alters a buyer's preference. The brand, the buyer, and the buyer's loss aversion are the entities and attributes mapped here. We connect these internal models to external reality through outcomes. The theory must produce specific explanations and concrete predictions about how consumers will actually behave in a market. This requires empirical testing through continuous feedback loops. We measure the exact proportion of predictive successes against the proportion of predictive failures. A high proportion of predictive success provides a rational warrant. It gives us reason to believe that something very much like the theory's unobservable constructs actually exists in the external world. This warrant embraces fallibilism. We are gaining reliable indicators of reality, not absolute certainty. The models can always be refined or replaced. Empirical testing translates abstract theoretical models into trustworthy representations of reality. It is the mechanism that keeps the discipline grounded in fact. The primary argument against this realist framework in the social sciences stems from a demand for absolute, immutable certainty. The philosopher Ram Hare identified the mechanical flaw driving this demand. He called it the philosopher's fallacy of high redefinition. Critical relativists arbitrarily raise the definition of truth. They argue that unless a theory can be proven with absolute infallibility, it cannot be considered true. They set a standard that is mathematically and logically impossible to achieve. By establishing this impossible metric, they force a slide into dogmatic skepticism. If perfect certainty is the only acceptable outcome, then all scientific knowledge is casually dismissed as invalid. This stance creates a self-refuting contradiction. Relativists frequently argue that scientific realism is false, but to make that claim, they rely on the exact correspondence theory of truth they are attempting to discard. They treat their own critique as an objective fact. Demanding a God's eye view is a paralyzing epistemological trap. It overlooks the progressive, fallible nature of empirical research, where evidence accumulates over time to build reliable knowledge. We see this skepticism applied directly to data. The relativist critique argues that data are entirely dependent on theory, making them social fictions with no equivalence to reality. We can stress test this extreme claim using a simple analogy, a thermometer. Look at this device.
The numerical scale, 102 degrees Fahrenheit or 38.9 Celsius, is an arbitrary, human-constructed theoretical label. However, the physical reality of the heat exists entirely independently of that numerical label. The thermal energy is real, regardless of the social construction. This maps directly back to marketing science. When we use a 1 to 10 purchase intention scale, that scale is constructed, but it acts as a fallible indicator of independent, real-world consumer phenomena. While our labels are social constructions, the underlying mechanisms they measure exist objectively. This relationship proves that empirical data records real-world phenomena rather than isolated human narratives. Despite these contradictions, many modern critical relativists in the social sciences base their arguments on Larry Loudon's reticulational philosophy. Loudon's premise is a radical shift in goals. He argues science must abandon the pursuit of truth, replacing it with maximum problem solving. In this model, truth and falsity are irrelevant to a theory's acceptability. We have to ask how this truth-agnostic model survives contact with severe, real-world ideological disputes. Substituting problem-solving for truth strips the scientific method of its core mechanism. Without a concept of truth, the discipline has no logical way to adjudicate between conflicting, mutually exclusive knowledge claims. The ultimate real-world test case for Laudan's philosophy occurred in the federal courts, during the debate over teaching scientific creationism in public schools. Laudan was called to testify. His task was to defend the boundaries of empirical science against creationist doctrines. To win the case, Laudan had to completely abandon his own reticulational model on the witness stand. His testimony argued that creationism makes empirical assertions that have been rigorously tested and definitively falsified. He relied on the exact concepts of truth and falsity his academic philosophy claimed were obsolete. He used truth to defend science, violating his own published framework. When forced to defend the legitimacy of science in reality, relativist philosophies collapse instantly. Protecting scientific inquiry requires invoking the concept of truth. This moves the debate away from abstract philosophical logic and directly into the day-to-day professional ethics of applied science and marketing research. Consider fiduciary trust in research, the implicit contract between a researcher and their audience. This network survives solely assuming the researcher reports external reality. Operating on the premise, they aren't simply spinning an arbitrary narrative. Ram Hare argued that science operates within a strict moral order, not just a methodological one. Stakeholders cannot verify every data point or rerun every regression analysis. They rely entirely on the researcher's honest commitment to presenting what they believe to be true. These epistemological choices carry severe ethical consequences. Treating truth as a disposable fiction destroys the moral foundation required to report data. Applying consensus or relativist theory to professional practice yields a catastrophic result. If truth is publicly deemed merely a social construct, professional legitimacy collapses. The framework holding the discipline together will snap. If data has no anchor in external reality, society loses any motivation to fund, trust, or act upon social science research. Scientific realism provides the necessary foundation for professional legitimacy. It ensures that data remains anchored in reality rather than drifting into arbitrary consensus. This realism offers a vital middle ground. It protects the discipline from the arrogance of dogmatic absolutism and the paralysis of skepticism. The pursuit of truth is never certain. But it's the only framework that preserves the integrity, utility, and moral legitimacy of the scientific endeavor.